The thunder crashed in the distance, as if the heavens themselves were protesting the injustice that had been done. I stood there, frozen, staring at the shattered remnants of my world. Ethan. My first love, the one I had trusted with everything I had. But in that moment, I knew. He wasn't the man I thought he was. And Lily, my sister, my flesh and blood, had stolen him away, and with him, a part of my heart I never thought I could get back. I could still hear the echoes of their laughter, the way their voices had intertwined in that intimate, quiet moment, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything I had ever imagined. I had always known that Lily had a way of getting what she wanted. She had this magnetism, this allure that made her irresistible. It wasn't that she was intentionally malicious. No, she never had to be. People were drawn to her effortlessly. And when it came to Ethan, I had thought I was safe. Ethan had been my first everything. He had held my heart in his hands, just as I had held his. But then, as the days went by, I started to feel something shift. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a quiet unease at the back of my mind. Little things that didn't make sense. The way his eyes lingered on her a second too long. The way they spoke in hushed tones when I wasn't around. And then came the day I walked in on them, standing in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms like nothing had ever existed between us. The sound of my own heart shattering was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. But it was impossible. The air in the room felt thick and suffocating, as if the weight of the betrayal was crushing me from all sides. I should have seen it coming. I should have known. But I had been blinded by love. The kind of love that made you overlook the small cracks, the things you didn't want to believe. You knew? I asked Lily, my voice trembling with the weight of the question. Her face softened, her usual calm demeanor faltering for just a moment. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Lila. It wasn't planned. Don't. Please don't say that, I interrupted, my breath catching in my throat. Don't try to pretend this wasn't deliberate. Ethan, standing awkwardly behind her, refused to meet my eyes. His silence was more damning than any apology he could muster. He started. But his words trailed off. He had no excuse, no justification. The damage had already been done. I took another step back, as though physically distancing myself from the pain that seemed to radiate from both of them. I trusted you, Ethan. I trusted you with my heart. But I was a fool. I didn't see the truth. You used me. All of this time. I thought we were building something real. Ethan's expression faltered. There it was again, the shift in his gaze, that glimmer of doubt creeping into his eyes. Lila, it's not like that. It is, I snapped, finally giving voice to the raw emotion building inside me. You've been using me this whole time. And you used Lily too, didn't you? You couldn't have been more perfect, the sweet charming man, and now look, now I see the truth. Lily, looking guilty and overwhelmed, stepped closer to me, her hands outstretched. Please, Lila, you have to understand. Understand what? I shot back, my voice rising with every word. That you took the one thing I thought I would have forever? That you took him when I was still trying to make sense of the world I thought I knew? Her face crumbled, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her perfection. I never wanted to hurt you, but I love him too, Lila. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Lily loved him too? But she hadn't just taken my place. She had taken the future I'd planned for myself, for us. She had taken something far more precious than I could ever give. And all along, Ethan had been a lie, wrapped in the kind of charm that could make any woman believe she was the one. I turned away from them, feeling the weight of my own tears threatening to spill over. The reality of it all was too much to handle, too much to bear. You don't get it, do you? I whispered, my voice barely audible now. This isn't just about you taking him from me, it's about the fact that you didn't even care to see who I really am. You took everything for granted, and I was just a tool, a stepping stone. There was no response. The room grew still, the silence settling in like a thick fog that I couldn't escape from. I had always been the quieter one, the one who kept her feelings bottled up, hidden beneath a composed exterior. But now, all of that was crumbling, falling apart like a house of cards. I need space, I said finally, my voice filled with the kind of rawness I didn't even recognize in myself. Without waiting for a response, I walked away from them. It was over, and as the door slammed behind me, I knew that nothing in my life would ever be the same. The sound of the door clicking shut was the only thing I could hear. The heavy thud of it reverberated through my chest as I stepped outside, my heart still pounding from the confrontation. The evening air hit me like a cold slap, but it wasn't enough to numb the fiery ache in my chest. I felt like I was suffocating, and for a moment, I wondered if I would ever catch my breath again. Everything around me seemed so much more alive than I felt. The streetlights flickered above, casting eerie pools of light on the cracked pavement. A breeze rustled through the trees, their branches swaying, as though even nature could feel the storm within me. The world was moving, spinning, but I remained still, frozen in this moment where everything I knew had shattered. I needed to get away. I needed distance, space, freedom. So, I did what I always did when the world became too much. I walked. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. My mind was reeling with everything I had just learned. Ethan, my first love, the man I had believed would be my forever, had been nothing more than a facade. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man I had loved. He was a liar, a user, a gold digger who had used me to climb his way up in the world. And Lily, my sister, how could she? How could she betray me like this? It wasn't just Ethan's deception, it was the fact that Lily, my own sister, had taken the one thing I had cherished more than anything. The thought of them together, of them laughing, of them touching, it made my skin crawl. I felt dirty, as though their betrayal had stained me too. I found myself walking to the park. The place where I used to go when I needed to think. The swings creaked gently in the breeze, swaying with a sadness that mirrored my own. I sat on one of them, my hands gripping the cold metal, and stared into the darkness. My mind was a blur, thoughts crashing together in waves of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could I have been so blind? But even amidst the chaos of my emotions, a small part of me recognized that this was my chance. This was the moment where I could finally rebuild. I could rebuild everything: my heart, my life, my sense of self. The thought was terrifying. It wasn't easy to let go of the past, of the version of me that had once loved so deeply. But I had no choice. If I didn't, I would never be free. And I knew I had to be free, for my own sanity, my own future. I leaned back on the swing, letting the gentle motion lull me into a trance. The night felt still, peaceful, almost surreal. It was as though the universe was giving me this moment to process, to breathe, before everything would change. A rustling sound broke through the quiet, and I turned, startled. "You're out here too?" A voice that was both familiar and foreign spoke softly, breaking the stillness of the night. I froze. It was Lucas, the man who had been there for me before, when I needed someone to talk to. But this time, it felt different. There was no pity in his eyes, no sympathy, just understanding. He had always been quiet, always kept his distance, but there was something in his gaze now that made me want to believe in him. "I needed some air," I said, my voice hoarse from the tears I had held back for so long. I wanted to be strong, but it was hard. Lucas, sensing my unease, simply nodded and sat down on the nearby bench. "I can't imagine what you're feeling right now," he said after a long pause, his voice deep and steady. "But I want you to know, whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." I didn't say anything. What could I say? Everything felt too raw, too fresh. I wasn't ready to share all of my feelings, to spill everything to someone who had always been more of an acquaintance than a friend. "I know it seems impossible right now," he continued, his voice softer, like he was trying to speak directly to my heart. "But this is your life, Lila. You have the power to rewrite it. Don't let what they did to you be the end of your story." His words hit me like a cold wave. He was right. I had a choice. I could let this be the end of everything, the end of who I was, who I had been, or I could use this as the beginning of something new. "How do you do it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do you move on from something like this? From the betrayal, from the lies?" Lucas looked at me, his eyes steady and unwavering. "You take it one step at a time," he said. "You allow yourself to feel everything: anger, pain, sadness. But you don't let it consume you. You use it, you turn it into strength. And then, when you're ready, you let it go. I let out a shaky breath. It was a simple answer, but it resonated with me in a way nothing else had. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe the road ahead would be long and painful. But I had a choice, and that choice was mine to make. Thanks, Lucas, I whispered, offering him a small smile. He nodded, standing up as though he could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. Take care of yourself, Lila. You don't need anyone's permission to be strong. You're already strong enough. The air in my apartment felt thick with tension the morning after my conversation with Lucas. It was the kind of heaviness that lingered long after the storm had passed, a sense of something unresolved hovering in the corners of my mind. I couldn't push it away, not the pain of betrayal, nor the bitterness that still clung to me like a shadow. The sunlight broke through the blinds, casting slanted rays across the wooden floor. I hadn't bothered to open the windows, leaving the stale air to accumulate. But now, as I stood in front of the mirror, I caught my reflection. My face was pale, hollowed out by sleepless nights and endless contemplation. But there was something else there too. Something new. A flicker of determination, an ember that refused to die out. I could still feel the ghost of Ethan's touch on my skin, his whispers, the way he once made me feel like I was everything to him. But now that feeling was tainted, corrupted by lies and deceit. I knew the time had come to face him. To face Lily. A soft knock on the door snapped me from my thoughts. My heart leapt into my throat. I knew who it was without even having to check. Lila? Lily's voice rang out through the thin wood. She always did this, always barged into my space with no regard for my privacy, for the way her presence always seemed to stir the conflict within me. But today, I wasn't just going to let her walk in without saying something. I took a deep breath. It was time. Time to take back what was mine, even if it meant confronting the woman who had been my sister for as long as I could remember. The woman who had crossed every line. With a shaky hand, I opened the door. Lily stood there, her eyes wide, hands folded nervously in front of her. She was dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. It was as though she was trying to look innocent, but there was a coldness behind her eyes that I couldn't ignore. The same coldness I had seen when she betrayed me. Lila, can we talk? Her voice was tentative, but the guilt was evident, even if she tried to mask it. I stepped back, motioning for her to enter. There was no use in pretending it was anything but this moment of reckoning. The silence between us was palpable as she walked in, her footsteps light but purposeful. She sat down on the couch, folding her hands in her lap, avoiding eye contact. I took a seat across from her, my legs pressed tightly together, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Finally, I broke it, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. Why, Lily? Why did you do it? Her eyes flickered to mine before quickly darting away. She bit her lip, as if trying to gather her thoughts. She wasn't going to give me the satisfaction of easy answers. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to hurt you. But I was lost, Lila. I've always felt like I was in your shadow. Ethan. He made me feel like I mattered. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles turning white from the pressure. You don't get to justify this, Lily. You don't get to excuse what you did just because you felt insecure. I trusted you. I trusted him. She flinched, her body tensing as if my words physically struck her. I never meant to betray you. I never meant to take him away. It just happened. The lack of responsibility in her words made my stomach churn. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. You knew what you were doing. You knew exactly what it meant when you kissed him, when you let him into your life, into our life. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't dare look at me directly. Instead, she stared at her hands, twisting them together as if they were the only thing grounding her. I was wrong, she whispered. I know that. But Ethan, he made me feel seen. He made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I let out a bitter laugh. He made you feel seen? Lily, he used you. You're not the only one who was manipulated. I was too. But you... My voice caught in my throat. You should have known better. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal bubbled up inside of me like a tidal wave. I stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in the small living room, struggling to keep my composure. You took the one thing I had left, the one thing that meant something to me, my trust, my love for him, my future. And you didn't care. You didn't think about the consequences, you just took it. I spat the words like venom. Lily's face crumpled as she finally looked at me. There was genuine sorrow in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. I'm sorry, Lila. I didn't realize. I didn't think it would hurt you like this. I thought I could have him, that I could have everything. And you thought I would just sit here and let you? My voice rose, raw with emotion. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't feel it? I was foolish, Lily murmured, her voice breaking. I was so focused on what I wanted, that I didn't see how much it would hurt you. I didn't realize how much it would break you. Her words fell like heavy stones into the stillness of the room. But they didn't reach me. They didn't fix anything. They couldn't undo what had been done. You can't take it back, I said quietly, my voice steady now but cold. You've lost me, Lily. And I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive you. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to silence her. No. I don't want to hear your apologies. I need time, I need space, and maybe in time I'll find a way to heal. But not with you, not with him. Lily's face paled, and I saw a flicker of something, fear, regret, or perhaps the realization that she had lost me for good. I turned away from her then, walking toward the door, but before I could open it, I felt her hand on my shoulder. Please, she whispered, her voice pleading. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at the door for a moment, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired. My sister, my first love, the man who had manipulated both of us, the mess that we were now tangled in. I'm done, I said softly. And I hope one day you'll realize what you lost. With that, I opened the door, and without another word, I walked out, leaving Lily behind. The days after my confrontation with Lily were a blur. It was as though everything in my life had been turned upside down. I had walked away from the apartment in a daze, my mind consumed with the pain of betrayal, and the sudden isolation that followed. But as I sat in my own apartment, surrounded by the silence that had become my constant companion, something unexpected began to stir inside me. The darkness that had once seemed suffocating began to lift, slowly and with hesitation. There was a quiet power in the way I could now breathe freely, unburdened by the weight of Lily's lies, and the toxic web I had woven around myself with Ethan. The tears, though still present, began to feel like a cleansing rather than an overwhelming force. I had spent too many years tied to the past, to the mistakes of others, and to my own weakness in allowing them to define me. But no more. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. This was just another chapter, and I could choose what came next. But with the end of one chapter, I knew there was another beginning. And though the future seemed uncertain, I felt an unexplainable pull towards something new, something better. It was a rainy Saturday morning, when my phone buzzed with a message from someone unexpected. Ethan. I hadn't heard from him since that night at the cafe when everything had spiraled. I had blocked him on social media and deleted his number, but there it was, a simple text. Lila, we need to talk, please. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. The anger that had flared up when I first saw his name began to wane, replaced by a cautious curiosity. I had no idea what he could want from me now, after everything that had happened. But I also knew that I couldn't move forward without addressing this. I had to face him, one final time. I typed a quick reply, my fingers trembling slightly on the screen. Where? I didn't need to say more. I was done with his games, with his manipulation. I just needed answers. He replied almost instantly, the park. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The last time I had seen Ethan in the park, we had spent hours talking under the oak tree, our voices mingling with the sound of the wind through the leaves. It had been one of those perfect, lazy afternoons when everything felt like it was falling into place. How naive I had been. I shook my head, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. I wasn't that girl anymore. I dressed quickly, pulling on a simple black hoodie and jeans. My reflection in the mirror stared back at me, no longer a girl lost in the shadows of others, but a woman ready to take charge of her own story. I had my own power now, and it felt both terrifying and liberating. As I walked out the door, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening with water. The air was crisp, cool, and refreshing. The park was only a 10-minute walk away, but it felt like a lifetime. My mind raced with questions, none of which I was sure I wanted answers to. When I arrived, I spotted him immediately. Ethan stood by the old oak tree, his hands shoved into his pockets, his gaze on the ground. He looked just like he had the last time I saw him. Lost, conflicted. But there was something about the way he stood there that made my chest tighten. I had once thought we would always be able to find each other in a crowd, but now, seeing him again, all I could feel was distance. I approached slowly, taking in the way his shoulders sagged, the way his eyes lifted to meet mine with hesitation. He looked almost like a stranger now, even though the history between us ran deep. "You wanted to talk," I said, my voice steady but sharp, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I wasn't sure if I was angry, heartbroken, or simply tired of it all. Ethan took a step toward me, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my stomach churn. "Lila, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to make this right." "You don't," I said, cutting him off before he could say more. "There's nothing you can say that will fix this, Ethan." The words stung as they left my mouth. I hadn't meant to sound so cold, but I had to protect myself. I had to be strong. "You and my sister, you both destroyed something that I can never get back, and no apology is going to fix that." He flinched, his eyes darkening with regret. "I know. And I'm so sorry. You don't understand how much I've hated myself for what happened." "You should," I shot back, feeling the anger flare up once again. "You should hate yourself. You lied to me, Ethan. You made me believe in something that wasn't real." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lila. I was lost, and I used you to fill the void I felt. I'm sorry for everything, for the way I treated you, for the way I betrayed you." His words were an admission, but they didn't come with the redemption I had expected. They felt hollow, like empty promises. I had spent so long waiting for him to see me, to choose me, and now all I felt was pity for him. "Why, Ethan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Ethan's gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, I saw the man I had once loved. He was broken, fragile, but still, there was something raw and real about him. "I don't know. I guess I never thought I'd lose you. I thought I could have both of you. But I was wrong, and now, I don't know what to do with myself." I stood there, looking at him for a long time. I saw the pain in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. I had to let go. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, to a version of Ethan that didn't exist anymore. "I've learned a lot, Ethan," I said softly, my voice steady now. "I've learned that I don't need you. I don't need anyone who doesn't see me for who I truly am. And I don't need your lies. Not anymore." He opened his mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm done. I don't hate you, but I can't be around you anymore. I've got to move on." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the park, the weight of his mistakes heavy in the air. The air felt different as Lila walked away from Ethan in the park, the trees swaying gently as the early evening light flickered through the leaves. Her chest tightened with every step, not from sorrow, but from the relief of finally closing the door on something that had been haunting her for so long. She could feel the space between them growing, the distance between who she had once been and who she was becoming expanding with every breath she took. The cold wind brushed past her face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she welcomed it. She was no longer trapped inside the walls of a love she had built in her mind, a love that had been nothing but a mirage. She was free, and that thought both terrified and exhilarated her. When she returned to her apartment, it felt strange. The silence that had once been her enemy now wrapped itself around her like a protective cloak. It was just her now, no longer held hostage by the past, by the ghosts of the people who had failed her. She closed the door behind her, the familiar click of the lock a sound of finality. She didn't know if it was the right thing to do, cutting ties with Ethan, with Lily, with everything that had once been, but it felt like the only choice she had left. Her fingers shook as she pulled off her shoes, her body still buzzing with the aftermath of the confrontation. Lila walked to the window, looking out over the city. The sky had darkened, and the glow of the streetlights below painted the streets with long, narrow shadows. The city felt alive, and for a moment she felt small, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But then the truth hit her: she wasn't small. She wasn't weak. She was stronger than she had ever been. She sank onto the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. The weight of everything she had just let go of, the love she had given freely, the betrayal, the lies, pressed down on her like an anchor, dragging her to the depths of the ocean. But she refused to drown. She had already walked through fire. She had survived. Her thoughts drifted to the future. What would it look like now? What was she supposed to do with this newfound freedom? Could she trust herself to make the right choices, to heal from the wounds that ran deeper than she had ever let anyone know? The knock on her door startled her, pulling her from her thoughts. For a split second, she thought it might be Ethan, coming to beg for her forgiveness, to somehow convince her that he hadn't meant any of it. But no, she had made her decision. She wasn't going back. She rose slowly, walking to the door, her heart racing for reasons she didn't fully understand. She hadn't expected anyone else to come tonight. The day had been hers, to do whatever she needed to rebuild the pieces of herself that had been shattered. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see a figure she hadn't expected: Lily. Her sister stood there, looking both tentative and determined, as if unsure of how to approach her. Her clothes were simple: dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, but there was an air of discomfort about her, like she was stepping into a world she didn't belong to. The way her eyes flickered nervously between Lila's gaze and the ground spoke volumes. "I know you probably don't want to see me," Lily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to talk to you." Lila's heart gave a little lurch, a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion swirling in her chest. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't thought she would ever see her sister again after what had happened. But here she was, standing at her door, asking for a chance to speak. "Why?" Lila's voice was steady but cold. "Why now, Lily? After everything?" Lily's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, Lila saw something in her sister's eyes she hadn't expected. Guilt. Real guilt. She wasn't the same confident, self-assured person who had betrayed her. There was a fragility to her now, an uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry, Lila," she said, her voice breaking as she spoke the words. "I made a terrible mistake. I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't understand the depth of the hurt I caused you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you would be okay, that it wouldn't matter." Lila crossed her arms over her chest, not letting the emotion she felt show. "And what about Ethan? Was he just another thing for you to take from me? Just another part of the life you wanted for yourself?" Lily winced at the accusation, her face flushing with shame. "No, Lila, it wasn't like that. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you, but I let myself get lost in the idea of having something I thought I needed, and I didn't think about how it would affect you." Lila felt the old wounds begin to resurface, the bitterness that had once seemed to consume her now threatening to spill over. But as she looked at her sister's face, she realized something. Lily wasn't just the person who had betrayed her. She was someone who had been lost too. Her sister's life had always been a complicated web of desires, insecurities, and mistakes. But somewhere, deep inside, Lily had always looked to Lila for guidance. And now, here she was, broken, asking for forgiveness in a way she had never done before. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Lila said, the words cutting through the air like shards of glass. But there was something in her tone, something unspoken, that showed she wasn't entirely closed off to the idea. "I know," Lily whispered, tears beginning to fill her eyes. "I don't expect you to. I just needed you to know how sorry I am." The silence between them stretched, thick with the weight of their shared history, of all the things that had gone unsaid for so long. But Lila knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Forgiveness, when it came, would come on her terms, not on Lily's. And it would take time. Lila nodded slowly, stepping aside to allow her sister in. The gesture was more than just a physical movement. It was a signal that, while she wasn't ready to forget, she wasn't ready to completely shut Lily out either. "We have a lot to talk about," Lila said, her voice softer now, but still firm. "I know," Lily replied, her eyes filled with determination. "And I'm ready to listen." As the door closed softly behind them, Lila's heart began to slowly thaw, the ice around it cracking one tiny piece at a time. The soft hum of the city was the backdrop to the quiet storm brewing within Lila. She stood by the window in her apartment, watching the faint glow of streetlights flicker against the approaching dusk. The evening sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, but inside, Lila felt the storm that had been brewing for weeks, no longer raging but gentle, almost peaceful. Lily sat in the living room, her eyes tracing the small imperfections in the walls, the cracks in the ceiling, the way the old wooden floorboards creaked under her every step. There was a tension in the air, palpable and heavy. It had been hours since Lila had let her sister in, and though they had spoken at length about the past, about the hurt, about the mistakes, there was still so much left unspoken. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It never had been. Lila turned from the window, her body rigid as she faced her sister. Her mind raced with the emotional weight of everything Lily had just revealed. She had been so certain, so sure, that her sister had taken everything from her. The love she had for Ethan, the future they had dreamed about. But now, seeing Lily in this raw state, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes that Lila hadn't noticed before, she realized something that had been hiding in the corners of her heart. Lily wasn't the enemy. She wasn't a villain. She had been lost too. "Lila, Lily started, her voice soft, hesitant. "I don't know how to make this right. I've said all the words but I know they don't mean much. They never will. Not after everything." Lila felt a tightening in her chest as she took a seat across from Lily. She could see the sincerity in her sister's eyes, but more than that, she could feel it. The weight of their shared pain, the burden they had carried separately but were now facing together. She knew that forgiving her sister wouldn't be an easy road, and it wouldn't be a quick one either. But maybe that was okay. Maybe they could both learn to heal, to rebuild what had been broken. "You don't have to make it right," Lila said, her voice steady but soft. "You can't. But you can be here now. You can be present. And so can I." Lily blinked, her eyes filling with tears, as she processed Lila's words. The emotional dam that had held everything in check suddenly broke, and tears spilled down her face. She had been waiting for Lila to hate her, to push her away. But here, in this moment, it was as if the two of them had started to speak the same language. A language of raw honesty, of understanding, and of pain, that was slowly transforming into something that could be healed. Lila reached out, placing her hand over Lily's, a silent offering of peace, of acceptance. "We're both broken, Lily. But we don't have to be broken forever. We just have to learn how to live with the cracks." Lily nodded, her hand trembling under Lila's. "I can live with that. I want to live with that." The hours that followed were spent in quiet reflection. The walls between them weren't completely gone, but they were crumbling, slowly, piece by piece. They shared stories from their childhood, laughed over old memories, and for the first time in a long time, Lila felt like the sister who had been lost to her was returning. Not the version of Lily who had been blinded by ambition, but the real, raw version, the one who was human, imperfect, and deserving of love. But even as Lila made progress with her sister, the shadow of Ethan still loomed. He was never far from her mind, and even though she had distanced herself from him, his memory lingered like an old lingering scent. She had loved him. She had trusted him. And he had hurt her. The next morning, Lila found herself standing at her bedroom window, staring out at the world with a sense of clarity that had eluded her for so long. The sun was brighter today, casting long golden rays across the city. She had made the decision. Today was the day she would fully embrace her independence. She would no longer be shackled by the choices she had made in the past. Lily had already left for the day. She was taking her first steps into her own life, her own journey of redemption. But Lila still had a few things left to do. There was one last loose end to tie up. Ethan. Lila's heart skipped a beat as his name echoed in her mind. It had been weeks since she had last seen him, since she had felt his presence in the space they had once shared. She had tried to convince herself that she was done, that she had moved on, that she had closed the door on that chapter of her life. But she couldn't ignore the pull he still had over her. The way his absence left a hole in her chest that no one else could fill. She needed to confront it. She needed to say the words that had been lodged in her throat since the day she had walked away. She had to take control of her own story, her own fate. And that meant facing Ethan one last time. Lila stood up from the bed, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over his name in her contacts, and for a moment she hesitated. But then she pressed the call button, the sound of the ringing phone echoing in the silence of the room. When Ethan finally answered, his voice was rough, like he had been waiting for this moment just as much as she had. "Lila?" His voice sounded so familiar, so warm, that it made her stomach tighten with longing. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "But I need to see you. One last time." Ethan's apartment was exactly as Lila remembered it. Cozy, intimate, filled with the faint scent of his cologne. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It didn't feel like it ever had. He was waiting for her by the door. Looking as handsome as ever, his hair falling into his eyes in that messy, irresistible way she had always loved. But now, as their eyes met, there was something different about him. He wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. He wasn't the man who had held her heart in his hands. He was a stranger. Someone she no longer recognized. "Lila," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I wasn't expecting this." "I wasn't expecting it either," she said, her words steady though her heart was racing. "But I needed to come here, to face what we were, and what we're never going to be." Ethan didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I know I hurt you," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I never meant to. I was so caught up in my own shit that I couldn't see how much I was destroying everything around me." Lila stood tall, her chin raised. "You weren't just caught up in your own problems, Ethan. You used me, you took my love, my trust, and you betrayed me." His face tightened. And for a moment he looked like he might break down. But Lila held up her hand, stopping him. "Don't apologize, just don't. I'm not the same person who would have fallen for you, who would have begged for you to love me. I've learned to love myself. I've learned that I am enough." Ethan stepped forward, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. But Lila pulled away, her gaze unwavering. "This is goodbye, Ethan. I'm moving on. And so should you." For the first time she saw the truth in his eyes. He knew it was over too. He knew that their time together had passed, that it was too late for them. With a final glance, Lila turned on her heel and walked out the door, leaving the past behind her for good. As she stepped into the cool night air, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She was free. And for the first time in years she was finally able to breathe. Months passed, and Lila continued to rebuild her life. She focused on her career, her personal growth, and her relationship with her sister. And while she had moments of doubt, moments where she wondered if she had made the right choices, she knew deep down that this was the life she was meant to live. The man who would one day earn her heart was still out there. But Lila was in no rush. She had learned that true love began with self-love. And that was enough for now. As for Ethan, she had no idea what his future held. She no longer cared. He had been a chapter in her life. But she was no longer defined by the man who had let her down. She was defined by the woman she had become, the woman who had learned to heal, to forgive, and most importantly, to choose herself. And that, in the end, was the greatest love story of all. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you loved these heart-stopping werewolf romance tales, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing content. Drop a comment below sharing your favorite moment. I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you in the next one. Stay wild and keep howling.